Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Kelly. I'm here with Americans for Legal Reform, and I want to introduce our first speaker. It is John Gilmore. He's been an activist for 25 years, very knowledgeable about vaccine injuries, autism, and certainly a big proponent for pro-choice vaccinations or people having the ability to choose. And I'm going to let him do the rest of the introductions and let him take it away.
Thank you, Greg. Well, thanks for inviting me. Hello, everybody. So just to take off from the little bit of introduction you gave, I've been working on autism and parental rights and vaccine rights issues pretty intensely for about 25 years or so. Tell you a little about how I got into this, and sort of like leads into much of the issues that I've been working with. When my younger son Luke was an infant, he was injured several times. He had 3 rounds of vaccines in his first year of life, and every time he had a round, he sustained marked changes in his health and his development. And on the 3rd round of vaccines he had was when he was right about 11 months. There was a really dramatic change. He had a couple words at the time. He lost those words, and he developed a list of symptoms which we weren't quite aware of at the time, but we soon learned were sort of classic symptoms of autism. He appeared to be deaf. He basically lost his sense of pain. He would stare at things for long periods of time, like a ceiling fan or a tree waving in the wind and so on. And that's kind of like the classic signs of it. And since he lost the skills that he had, that's called a regression. And about a third to half of all people who are eventually diagnosed with autism regress. They develop normally for a time, and then something happens, and they basically move into autism. And there's no question in my mind and my wife's mind that this was caused by vaccines. You frequently hear, well, there's no studies that show that happens. But it's really, well, there's a lot of studies that show it happen, right? They just don't get a lot of attention. The largest drug companies in the world are also the largest vaccine companies in the world: Merck, Pfizer, Sanofi, Glaxo, and so on. And they have immense amount of power. And we'll get into that, I guess, as we go. So let's talk about what autism is. I guess you could give a definition of it. I guess everybody has an idea of it, but just defining it is really kind of difficult. Since my son was born, autism has been significantly redefined 3 times, right? And that is done by the American Psychiatric Association. And they, every 8-10 years, they put out a big manual called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And since there's so little, particularly when my son was first diagnosed back, believe it or not, he got his official diagnosis on September 11th, 2001, right? We had gone to the doctors for a while, and that's when they called us and let us know what's going on. But back then, not a lot was known about it, and there's still not a lot known about it. And that's one of the things about the work I've been doing that sort of motivates me. It's like when my son was first diagnosed, officially we did not know what caused autism, right? There was no approved treatments for it. There was no approved cures for it. And we thought that the autism rate was about 1 in 500 to maybe 1 in 1,000. This would have been around 2001, right? So here we are 25 years later, huge amounts of attention, billions and billions of dollars spent. But we are still in a situation where officially we still don't know what causes autism. We have no treatments for it. There is no cure for it. However, the official autism rate is now about 1 in 31 kids, okay? Now, in the 1960s, they used to tell pediatricians, people training to be pediatricians in medical school, that you will probably go your entire career without seeing a case of autism. And I doubt if there's a pediatrician in America today who doesn't have a kid with an autism diagnosis coming into his office every hour. Right? We're talking 1 in 31 kids with autism. It affects, for every girl who has autism, there's probably about 4 boys, right? And amongst boys, it's about 1 out of every 21 or 22 boys under the age of 8 in the United States right now, okay? We're talking about a catastrophic growth in this disorder, right? And I think of it as a disorder. I think of it basically what I think autism is essentially it's brain damage and it's neurological damage, right? It tends to interfere with people's ability to communicate, to speak. It tends to narrow people's interests. People with autism tend to have very sort of focused things that they like to do and repeat. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's just sort of one of the reasons, one of the ways that they diagnose it. And it happens, and this is what happened with my son, because there's neurological damage and brain damage going on. Now, one thing that we've learned over the years is that about 80% of people diagnosed with autism have antibodies to their own nervous system. So that means basically their immune system is attacking their own body, right? Attacking their own nervous tissue, right? Which leads to they're in a constant state of inflammation, particularly in their nervous system, which interferes with the operation of everything that's going on. And there's been a lot of contention about what autism is over the years, okay? Some people don't even acknowledge it as potentially being a problem, right? They talk about it as being just sort of a different way of being, and that there's nothing wrong with it. And if people want to say that about themselves, I have no problem with it. But I mean, you know, with a severe case of autism, like my son is 25 years old and he has about 10 words, right? And he has such motor planning problems. There's a lot of things he can't do. He can't tie his shoes and things like that. His autism interferes in every aspect of his life. Is there a question?
I did. I noticed they switched in the new DSM, the 5th edition. They made autism one spectrum-related disorder. It's not like a conglomerate-related disorder. It's like F84.0 now is what they call it.
Wow, you're taking over.
But,
Do you have an infected child?
I'm a provider.
Okay.
But I'm just curious as to if you had any insight on why they did that. They basically made 5 or 6 different things, in my opinion, into one diagnosis, and it's based on obviously a spectrum and a range of symptoms.
Right.
Now, when you talk about the nervous system being
challenged, is that something that there's been blood work testing done on? Is there a definitive way to like isolate that feature in there?
Well, there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, and it's interesting you brought up blood work, because we still don't have a definitive test for autism. Okay, there's no agreed upon biomarkers for autism. It's still diagnosed strictly based on the behavior of the person you're talking about, right? So they observe, basically what autism is a list of symptoms, right? And they literally have checklists. And it used to be sort of like an old Chinese menu, remember, like 50 years ago? Well, some of you would, right? But remember, they would like pick one from column A, 2 from column B. When you went to a Chinese restaurant, they would do the exact same thing. With autism, you had to have, so they also had certain terms to describe basically kind of the severity of the autism, right? Like when my son was first diagnosed, it was called pervasive developmental disability not otherwise specified, PDD-NOS, right? They got rid of that, right? And another term that probably you're more familiar with is the term Asperger's syndrome, okay? That was sort of like a less severe form of autism, people with less, basically, disability. I think it was the 5 did away with the DSM-5. Again, that's the manuals that they use.
They did take Asperger's out of the DSM-5. Everything that you just said, the 5 or 6 disorders,
Right.
they pushed them all into one disorder. It's autism spectrum disorder.
Right.
And then the F84.0, that's basically the billing code.
Right. Right. And why they do that, I can't really explain it. You know, it almost seems like when you start looking at the new editions of it, it almost seems to be arbitrary. Maybe whatever the most current thinking is amongst the psychiatrists, and that goes into it. And you know, I think there are a lot of things that cause autism. Right? I'm not, you know, some people say it's only one thing, right? Some people say it's only vaccines or only something else. And I just don't think that's the case. I've just seen too many instances of people with autism where there's no sort of consistent exposure or things that have happened to them that make sense about that. And we already know that some things do cause autism. We've known for a while. There are certain exposures, there's certain substances, we'll call it. Women who take this drug called Depakote during pregnancy have a much higher incidence of autism. One thing I find very encouraging is just last week, you know, autism as an area and also vaccines as an area of concern is obviously a major priority with President Trump. That's why he appointed Bobby Kennedy to be Secretary of HHS. Which reminds me, I didn't really tell you anything about my background, okay? I guess I should do that before I get to other groups over the years. I've done a lot of work with Children's Health Defense, which is the nonprofit organization that Robert Kennedy founded about 8 or 9 years ago and was working with before he ran for president. I've known Bobby for about 20 years, and I was one of the co-founders of American Values 2024, which was Bobby Kennedy's main super PAC when he was running for president. And when he made his alliance with Trump and, you know, it's going to be the Secretary of State, of course, we transferred allegiances there as well and worked to get Trump elected. And we're still not with the super PAC anymore because the election's over. Still working with those people, and we're really doing what we can to help Kennedy's agenda, which we'll get to a little bit more about, but that's sort of the work I've been doing for a while. So anyway, so that answers 2 years. The CDC does releases the new autism numbers, right? They've been doing it since the first time that they came out was in 2000, right? And that's where we get these 1 out of 31, 1 out of 500, and so on numbers that I've been talking about before. And one thing that is a huge problem is that every time they come out with new numbers, they always say, well, we think it's because we're doing a better job of finding people with autism, or they say that we've changed the diagnostic criteria, and so there's more people who are sort of being included within it, right? And there's a little bit of truth to that, but not much. If you're talking about somebody on the severe end of autism, which is about 30 to 40% of that, by that I mean people who are nonverbal, who you very, very quickly know that they've got significant disability, right? There's no way to hide that. I mean, if you have a grown man who cannot speak, or even if you have an 8-year-old kid who cannot talk, that's not something people overlooked in the classroom before, right? So I don't think that really, and they say, but we're not really sure, and they still do this, right? 40 years ago, the autism rate was about 1 in 10,000, right? Now it's 1 in 22. And the CDC still says they're not sure if the autism rate has gone up or not, okay? And part of the problem is it would be real easy to do the epidemiology to figure that out, but they don't do it, they've avoided it deliberately, right? And I'm hoping that's one of the things that Trump and Kennedy are going to do is actually start looking into why that's going on. Yeah.
Has there been any Bradford Hill criteria analysis studies of the relationship between autism and anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there's lots of things. I mean, there's at least a dozen studies out there that show there's a direct relationship between exposure to certain kinds of pesticides and autism. There is the Depakote I mentioned earlier. There's this other drug called valproic acid that also causes autism. One thing also really interesting is that they used to say, they don't say this anymore, but they used to say that measles can cause autism. Right? A real bad case of measles can result in autism. Right? You have a live vaccine. Okay, that's a vaccine that actually has the live virus in it. There's live and there's dead vaccines. But the measles the measles vaccine is a live virus vaccine. So if you put the two together, if measles can cause autism, which they accept, then it also goes that the live virus measles vaccine should also be able to cause autism, right? And they used to say that, and they realized sort of what we can't say that anymore. They just sort of stopped saying it probably about 15, 20 years ago. Right? So anyway, and I think at this point, you know, let me see some hands. How many of you, good hand.
I gotta ask you a question there. You said 40 years ago, it was like 1 in 10,000?
Yeah.
Well, 40 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. And developing kids, when they're younger, the brain's always developing.
Right.
You know, you put it against your brain here, you put it against your head here, and those electric waves go into your head.
Right.
Just like on the high tension lines, you have the EM pulse.
Right.
Same thing with the TVs. How many people watched 40 years ago? How many people was glued to the TV like we do now?
That's a really good question. I hope we look into it.
So if your brain works on electromagnetic current and everything else, there, those pulses are disrupting them, disrupting your brain from growing and doing what it has to do. So I believe that's a part of it. If anything, there, you know, because we were always contaminated with what do you call it, with stuff in the ground and stuff there.
Sure.
And they outlawed it. The stuff they poisoned the ground with and stuff there. With outlawed it. But the electric devices we have today is it's doing something to the brain. And the kids wearing those cell phones and wearing those head things and listening to music, blasting the music all the time. There has to be something that's stopping your brain from functioning. I believe that's part of it, if not all of it.
It very well could be. I'm not aware of any research into that, but, you know, there really should be. I mean, considering if you think about the massive increase in the exposure of all kinds of radiation through microwaves and all the electronic devices we have, you would think they would want to take a look at that, but I'm not aware that they have. What about you guys? You guys heard anything about that?
Well, I know that they know the health business too. I don't know, they never said like autism, but I sent out to the congressman and I got one response from Schumer way back, and he admitted that the EMFs and the 5G they are aware of the health risks.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't know about the autism connection.
Yeah, I really think it should be looked at, though. It seems.
I want to add something there.
Yeah.
You go into an MRI, you're exposed to 5,000 Gauss. That's a measurement of electromagnetic fields. In this room, it's about 2 Gauss. So the little bit you might get from that, I don't see the significance of it. By the way, I worked with the people who invented that.
Right. I just don't know. You know, I don't really have any information about it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think the thing is it needs to be really looked at. When you're talking such a major change in the environment, it's definitely something that needs to be researched. But I don't have any answers about that one. All right, so Now, so you guys are I'm sorry, you guys are Americans for Legal Reform, right? So I'm going to sort of go kind of into more legal direction. But before I do that, just to give you the idea, all right, we talk about the numbers, but one of the things that's going on, and I'm sure some of you guys have probably noticed this, is sort of the playing down of the severity of autism, right? And I think one of the reasons the numbers are up is I think a lot of people who, there's no way they would have got an autism diagnosis 20 years ago can get an autism diagnosis now, right? Now, like I said, I have a son who is 25 years old, he has 10 words, he can't tie his shoes, right? And then you'll see people, a lot of media, I think it's become almost a fad sort of in the media these, you'll see people who have successful careers as entertainers, they're very verbal, they have significant relationships, they have businesses, they're fully functioning adults, yet they're claiming to be autistic. Right? Now, I'm not saying that they may not have communication issues or so on and so forth, but if someone like that has autism, and then and there's people who are far more affected. My son, it's like some people are so neurologically impaired that they don't really have bowel control, right? So if you have someone who can't speak and doesn't have bowel control, and that's autism, and then you have somebody who's making movies in Hollywood, and and they say they have autism, then autism becomes what it is, the actual biological things that are going on in people that are interfering with how they function and communicate and get along in the world. Because I think once we've done that research, and it's just insane that here we are decades into this epidemic and we haven't done that, right? But I hope, and that the current administration will be doing that. I think it probably will quite soon. I think the new administration is going to be it already has been a complete ocean change in approach to autism. But there's all kinds of other things that go on with people with autism. With people, adults that have autism, the unemployment rate is at least 90%. Close to 90% of all adults with autism live with their families because they can't really be independent. About a third of people with autism have seizures. About 40 to 50% of them can't speak or really have any kind of effective way of communicating. Right? It's a really severe situation. Probably one of them loses their career, right? Because the amount of care that's necessary is so high that it's very difficult to have the sort of typical two kind of career family that's going on. There's immense cost with that. But a study came out a couple of years ago, and a few years ago they were saying they estimated the cost for autism was about $240 billion a year, right? And at current growth rates, they anticipate by 2040, it's not that long from now, they expect it to be about $1.5 trillion a year, right? And if the rate in autism doesn't go down, it's going to be much, much greater than that. We're already talking about 4% of American boys are not really going to be able to be functioning adults. That is just catastrophic, right? And it's just not being dealt with that way. So anyway, let me go back to sort of some of the issues that I think kind of fit in with the whole sort of legal concerns that your group has. Early on in my dealing with my son, some information came out, right? Maybe you guys have heard of this, that implicated mercury in vaccines as being a potential cause of autism in children, right? And you may recall that a couple of weeks ago, the United States finally were almost like the last country in the world to ban the use of mercury in vaccines. Believe it or not, some vaccines still have mercury in it to this day, right? And the ostensible reason they put mercury in vaccines is because you're probably all aware, mercury is very good at killing live things, right? And you guys probably remember multi-dose vials of vaccines. It has a little bottle with a rubber stopper, and the nurse or doctor would take the syringe, stick it in the bottle, take out a dose, and they would take those needles and inject multiple needles into the bottle, right? Well, that can introduce contaminants, which could cause diseases and infect people. So back in the 30s, they decided, well, mercury will kill things, so let's just put a little bit in there and everything will be fine. And so they did that for 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they got into the 90s. And there was a group of parents in Brick Township, New Jersey, who noticed there was like all these autistic kids all of a sudden. And I guess they talked to some of the people who, in particular Bernard Gremlin, he was the guy who founded the Autism Society of America and a few other associations. He was a sort of very influential thinker about autism. And they became suspicious that perhaps that mercury in vaccines could be a factor in it. So they got their congressman to introduce some legislation that required the FDA to measure how much mercury were in kids' vaccines, because the way they did it at the time is they did it as a percentage of the volume of the shot. You can't calculate a dose with the volume. You have to know the actual quantity in there. And when they did it, the FDA completely freaked out. We know this because the emails that were going around in the FDA got leaked, right? And they could see that the quantity of mercury that the kids were getting was vastly more than any kind of standard they had out there. There's just like no way it could be safe, right? And then they hired a Belgian epidemiologist to take a look at that and see if there was any indication that perhaps could be causing autism. And he did an internal study. All right, he looked at kids who got mercury in their vaccines at birth and when they were really young, because in the early 90s they introduced birth, which is kind of interesting because hepatitis B is spread through exchange of bodily fluids. It's basically through sharing needles or sexual contact. But for some reason they didn't want to test the mothers to see if they had hepatitis B. And if a mother doesn't have hepatitis B, you don't have to worry about the kid having hepatitis B. They just decided to go ahead and give the kids the shots, right? And these shots had mercury in them, right? And anyway, they found out that basically kids who in the first 3 months of life got mercury-containing vaccines had 1,100 times, or 1,100%, 11 times as much autism as the kids who did not get the mercury in their vaccines, right? And again, alarm bells went off within the public health establishment, and they put together a meeting. They held it at the Simpson Wood Conference Center down by Atlanta, Georgia, where the CDC is. And they brought in all the government officials. They brought in about this. But basically what they decided to do was not to tell anybody. And they were just going to sort of quietly pull vaccines off the market that had mercury in them, right? And oddly enough, this was right at the time when my son was born. And my son did not get the birth hepatitis B because they had, right before he was born, they pulled those off the market. But they still left a lot of other mercury-containing vaccines on the market. And when my son was 60 days old, he got, I think, 5 vaccines, 4 of which had mercury in it, right? And later on, I sort of got the records of what he got. I did the math, and for his birth, for his weight, he got 87 times as much mercury as would be considered safe for a full-grown adult to eat, and this was injected into his body, right? And as you may have, as I talked about before, there's concerns about mercury in it. There's also concerns about the very famous paper that people don't understand, and it was just called the case series. And he said that I've run into about 10 cases in a row of children who have developed a weird intestinal disorder along with autism following the MMR, and it needs to be studied. That's all he said in the study. And basically, it took a while, but they eventually shut him down about that, right? So what happened was, a lot of people heard about this. Like I said before, the papers got leaked of the internal happenings of the people who were sort of investigating this at Simpsonwood. And people started filing suits in the vaccine court. Right? One of the things that happened, this is really important for the whole vaccine industry, is back in the 1970s, there were very few vaccines, and some of them, particularly the pertussis, wasn't very safe. And the vaccine industry basically told the federal government is that we need to have protection from court, otherwise we're going to get out of the vaccine business, right? So they passed this law in 1986 that basically said vaccines cases will no longer go to regular court, they will go to this vaccine court, which was supposed to be sort of like a no-fault court. It was supposed to be very quick and sort of generous idea to the families, right? That's the way it started out. It didn't last that very long, all right? But then there was about 5,000 cases of claims that their autism amongst children was caused by vaccines. They were all lumped together around 2003, and what they decided to do is that a couple more to test whether the combined thing, the Marisol and MMR, would be causing it, right? And my family was in that, right? And it went on, and it went on, and it went on, and right as it got to like when they were supposed to end it, some very strange things happen, and I guess you guys are well aware very strange things can happen in courts, right? But what they did is there was this one case, a girl named Hannah Poling, okay? And she was one of the test cases, and the idea behind the test case is that if it applied to these 6 test cases, it would apply to the 5,000 other kids, right? Well, they pulled her out of it, and they said, well, she has autism-like symptoms. We're not going to say it's autism. But as I said before, all autism is a list of symptoms. And she said she has autism-like symptoms. We're going to give her $20 million. That is opinion of experts in the vaccine world, right? And one of them was decided based on the testimony of this one expert by the name of Zimmerman, right? And he made an initial statement in court saying that he did not think that this one child's autism was caused by vaccines. But then he got some more information and he changed his mind. Okay, this was the federal government's own witness that they selected, right? And when he changed his mind, they basically hit him. They would not let him go back. They would not let him testify, whatever, right? So here you are, 6 cases. 2 of them, they decided that yes, indeed, the vaccines did cause the autism, but somehow those didn't apply, right? And they were all dismissed. Now, also in those days, if you went through the vaccine court and you didn't like the outcome, you could go to a real court with, and in the vaccine court, okay, you have no right to discovery. You cannot subpoena anybody. Your lawyer does not work for you. They actually work for the Department of Justice, and they are paid by the Department of Justice, right? It's not a real court at all, right? And so a lot of the people who were in Omnibus, the big combined lawsuit, decided to go to regular court like the law said we could. Well, right after that happened, there was a Supreme Court case called Wyeth v. Brucewitz. I'll spare you the details, but it just slammed that door shut, right? And so essentially what you have now is that since 1986, the vaccine industry has had complete legal immunity. You cannot sue a vaccine manufacturer. You cannot sue a doctor that gives a vaccine. They're completely protected, right? Essentially what happened is our Seventh Amendment right to a trial by jury for any injury greater than $20 was completely voided. Now, how Congress can pass a law that takes away a right like that, that's right in the Bill of Rights, I don't understand, but that's exactly what has happened. Right?
Who promoted that?
Initially, it was there was a Democratic congressman from LA named Henry Waxman, who was a big promoter of it. That was under Reagan, but the way it was originally sold, though, was you could always have the option of going to a real court. It really got bad when they completely took away your right to go to a real court. So, yeah.
When you say you don't know how it can happen, I feel like it's just been years and years of that argument. How does this happen? How does this happen? How does this happen? When we have a constitution.
Right.
How is it happening and why is it happening and how do we stop it? Like yesterday. Because this is just becoming
Right.
it's becoming a joke. There is no, there's no art of law anymore. And it's how do we actually
Sure. That's a good question.
yeah, let's do it. I mean, it's like time.
And happily, a couple of weeks ago, Congressman Paul Gosar from Arizona introduced a bill to do just that. Okay, basically, it would end the vaccine carve out and just go back to the way it was in 1985, and you just go to court. And they're going to fight like hell to stop that. Okay, because basically, when they took away the liability, right, all of a sudden, vaccines became a very attractive industry. And in 1986, before the liability immunity was removed, the vaccine industry in the United States was worth less than $100 million a year, right? Last year, it was worth about $30 billion, okay? In 2021, when the COVID shot came out, it was worth somewhere around $100 to $150 billion. We're talking massive, massive sums of money, right? And they're going to try and protect that, right? But this is the first time we've had a real serious bill to do that, right? And I'll put a plug. If you get on my website, Autism Action Network, and sign up for our emails, one of the things that we do all the time is keep people informed about what legislation in Washington we need to support, what we need to stop, and we also very, very carefully follow what's going on in New York as well. Because in addition to that federal bill I just mentioned, there is a bill here in New York, a little different, but what it says is that if you are injured by a vaccine that's mandated, all right? Like I guess probably a lot of people had to get a shot for work with COVID. Colleges forces kids to get shots. Schools force kids to get shot. What this bill would say is that if you're injured by a mandated vaccine, you have the right to sue. So, and there's other bills out there. For the first time, we're really getting bills that the vaccine industry has over us. Another big issue in New York, which you guys may be aware, is that in 2019, we lost our right to a religious exemption in New York, right? And we've always had it. And in 2019, when this was repealed, there were only 2 other states that did not have religious exemptions. And those states were Mississippi and West Virginia. And then in 2019, the powers that be in Albany decided, like, well, yeah, let's use Mississippi as a model for civil liberties and public health policies, right? And did away with it. We have a bill to try and bring it back in Albany, right? And we also just had a bill introduced just 2 weeks ago in Washington. It's called the GRACE Act. It was introduced by Greg Steube of Florida. And what it does is that there's 4.5 states that don't allow religious exemption. New York is one of them, California, Connecticut, and Maine. Okay? And all those states had religious exemptions up until like the last 5 years or so. And they all decided to repeal them. Right? One of the things that's happened over the last few years is vaccine politics have become very, very polarized. Right? It used to be we had friends on both sides of the aisle, we had enemies on both sides of the aisle, and starting in the Obama administration, it's really kind of become polarized. And of course, Republicans are the ones who are fighting for vaccine rights now, and it's very difficult to find any Democrats who will do that. Right? Even ones who used to be very strongly in favor of us are not really willing. The Democrats are willing to do anything anymore. But we are trying to bring back the religious exemption with that, with the state legislation and the legislation in Washington. What the one in Washington would do is it doesn't order the states to do it, but the way the bill is written, it says that basically taking away the religious exemption is a basic violation of people's religious freedom. Right? It's a violation of our First Amendment rights, and it's also a violation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1994. Right? And what they're saying is that the federal government cannot use federal resources or spend federal money to take away people's religious freedoms. So they're telling the states with this one that you got a choice. You can either not offer people a religious exemption, or you can lose your federal education funds. We're not going to force you to do either one. It's up to you to decide what you want to do, but we cannot be a party to that anymore. So that, again, that just came in. We're very excited about that. And now another issue we've been working on quite a bit, some people were asking me about this. This has gotten a little bit of attention in Long Island, particularly in the last couple of weeks, is that, just to make it personal, when my son was very little, we had at least half a dozen doctors say, don't give that kid another shot. Okay? It will not be good for him, which we knew, right? But he had to go to school. So he said, okay, well, will you give us a medical exemption, which doctors can't do? And they said no. All of them said no, because they said, if I do that, I'm going to have the Department of Health on my back. They'll be threatening me. If I give a couple of them, they'll go after my license. Right? And they all said, go get a religious exemption, which is what we did. Right? Unfortunately, my son was done with school before they repealed it, but many, many other people were not. Right? And I know literally hundreds and hundreds of families that left Long Island and New York when they peeled their religious exemption. I know more people in Florida and South Carolina and Texas who used to live in Montauk and Huntington and places like that, just over the last few years because of that move that we did here. So Cuomo was bad enough, but Hochul took it one step further. What she has been doing recently is that she is going after medical exemptions. Kids who have had long-standing medical exemptions are just arbitrarily being told by their schools, no, you can't have a medical exemption anymore. For no particular good reason other than it's the policy of the state of New York to get all the kids vaccinated, regardless of what's going on.
I want you to clarify one thing for me.
Yeah.
Are you anti-vax all 100%?
No, it's just that there are people who are injured by them. And the powers that be simply refuse to recognize that. It's like anything else. It's like saying, well, are you against medicine? Well, you know, medicines with the right person in the right place at the right time could be a really good idea, right? But it can also cause side effects and kill people as well. And the way the system is right now, it simply refuses to recognize that some people can be injured by this. It's like this.
I just want to follow up on one other thing. During the pandemic, if we had the ability to say no, and we wouldn't have saved 1 million people, that's what they're telling us, and without having everybody vaccinated, you're really not solving the pandemic situation.
Well, a lot of people, like Bobby Kennedy, for example, would argue with you that the COVID vaccine saved nearly as many people as was claimed. I mean, one thing that we saw during COVID is
I don't know whether you could pull that out of his asshole.
No, he didn't, because we don't have good data, all right?
Yeah, you know, I had to quit my job in small Catholic Catholic Center because I didn't want to do vaccine.
Right.
But to find another job, you have to have mandatory to have a vaccine.
Right. There's a ton of misinformation, for lack of a better word, not coming from people who are critical of vaccines, but from people like Pfizer that made $100 billion in 1 year off the COVID shot, right? They knew from the very, I don't want to spend too much time on the COVID shot, but they knew from the very beginning that the COVID shot did not stop transmission, okay? Didn't matter if you had a COVID shot or not, you could still spread COVID. So if you can spread COVID, you're not protecting anybody.
You're protecting yourself.
Yeah, but that should be up to me, not my employer, not Eric Adams, okay, not Bill de Blasio, not Andrew Cuomo. I don't want them making medical decisions for me or my kid. What do they know? I mean, he's the same guy who thought it'd be a good idea to put people with COVID. I'm not saying COVID was a disease, okay? He's the same guy who decided, let's put people infected with COVID back into the nursing homes, right? Okay? And which ended up with my mother getting COVID and dying from COVID. I take COVID really seriously, right? But a lot of lies are told about the efficacy of the COVID shot, right? And remember when they all told us if you get the COVID shot, you're not going to get it? How many of you guys got a COVID shot and ended up with COVID?
Many times.
There you go. Right? Yeah.
Can you speak to the case law of Jacobson versus Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 1905?
I'm not a lawyer, but I know a little bit about it. Okay, this was a case in Massachusetts in 1905 that is used to say that the state has a right to force you to get a shot, right? That's what it's frequently used to do, but what it actually did is Jacobson had got a smallpox vaccine and got really sick from it, right? And then there was another outbreak of smallpox in Boston or Massachusetts, and they told everybody, you got to get a shot. And he says, I'm not going to get a shot, okay? And what they said, okay, then you got to pay a fine. And he says, I'm not going to pay a fine, right? And this went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided with the state of Massachusetts, right? But what that meant then, though, is that he had to pay the fine. He did not have to get the shot. Big difference, right? And frankly, I don't think Jacobson's going to be around much longer, right?
Well, that's certainly good news, especially since it predated the Daubert standards in terms of admissible evidence, because there was no evidence admitted to the contrary in that case.
Really? You know more about it than I do, yeah. But I mean, that's still the kind of case that's always rolled out to defend the government's right to tell you what you have to put in your body or not. Right? And just I want to follow up on a little bit about this, right? During COVID, right, Sweden basically did what standard epidemiology told them that they should do, right? And that was they needed to protect vulnerable older people. If we have a vaccine, we might want to get a vaccine, but they did not close down their economy. They did not close down their schools. When the vaccine came out, they didn't give it to the population in general, just to people with vulnerable immune systems, had a reason to do it. And they were told, oh, you're crazy, you're insane, your whole population is gonna die, okay? Guess which European country had the lowest death rate from COVID?
Sweden.
Sweden, right? And there was a group of, a couple of scientists, one is Jay Bhattacharya, who's an epidemiologist at Stanford. Another one was Martin Kulldorff, an epidemiologist at Harvard or MIT, or both. And another epidemiologist from Oxford, that's a long Indian name I can't pronounce, right? They got together and wrote this thing called the Great Barrington Declaration. Perhaps you've heard about it early on. And basically what they said is to do, Sweden wasn't doing it yet, they laid out the Swedish model as what should be done. They were called insane, they were called crazy. Martin Kulldorff got fired.
But they did have a strategy. It wasn't like it wasn't all or nothing at all.
Right, right. And you know, that's I think one of the things that people who are like me, who are critical of the way vaccines are handled, is that you have one side that says, you must do exactly what the government tells you to do, and the government basically does whatever Pfizer and Merck and Sanofi tell them to tell us to do, and you cannot question it at all, right? And the people who support that say, oh, you're against all vaccines, you don't want anybody to have it, and they're all bad. Okay? I haven't said that tonight. Okay? Bobby Kennedy has never said that. He says the exact opposite all the time. But people want to listen. They don't want to hear that, right? It's kind of like this. Imagine if they passed a law where a kid at the first day of school, every September, they have to eat a big tablespoonful of peanut butter. What would happen?
We'd run out of peanut butter.
Most kids say, great, I love peanut butter, right? Some kids would get sick. Some would go into anaphylaxis. Some kids would die, right? And that's kind of true of anything, if you give it to everybody, okay? Now, what do we do to try and identify people who are vulnerable from injury from the vaccine? Nothing. The approach here is everybody gets it, no exceptions, okay? And if you get hurt, that's too bad, okay? One of the really biggest supporters of the vaccine industry in Albany is this state senator named Brad Hoylman. And those people won't even talk to us anymore. But a few years ago, when he would still talk to us, I told him the story about what happened to my son, right? And his response was, well, even if what happened to your son is true, that's just the price we have to pay to protect everybody else, okay? So it comes down to like, how many kids are you going to sacrifice to supposedly protect the others? And how do you know you're not sacrificing way more kids that might be happening on the other side, right? So, you know, again, it's like, I agree with Bobby Kennedy about this, and what has he been saying? Contrary to what the media says he's been saying, he says anybody who wants to get a vaccine that is like medically indicated should be able to get it, okay? But nobody should be forced to do it. Yeah.
Sounds like
The argument, my body, my choice, just in opposition to everything that one side is saying.
Is that weird?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a complete,
Yeah.
contradiction.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't apply to the immune system. I don't really know. But, yeah, so anyway, I mean, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's what my work has always been about, was like, let's make sure everybody has a choice, okay? Let's make sure we make these things safe as possible. Let's make sure we identify the people who get injured, right? Let's find out what's really going on with autism and separate it into what's actually the actual biological problem people have and do something about it. And I'm hoping, and I think there's a lot of reason to think that we're going to be making a lot of progress, right? President Trump talks more about autism than any other president ever, right? And he talks about it in a way of like looking for a real solution. So it's very, very encouraging. Yeah.
I watched a hearing today.
Yeah.
Bob Johnson,
Uh-huh.
Aaron Siri, and another person on the Siri side, and then a pro-vax guy who was a disgrace, absolutely terrible. And I'm more hopeful today because there was a study years ago, vax versus unvaxxed children.
Right.
It was a period of years, and the results of that, they basically put it all forward.
Right.
And I'm feeling a little bit better today about it.
Good.
And I would tell everybody to watch it because they also got into the COVID thing too.
Yep.
It was a very, very interesting hearing.
It was. Yeah. And we're finally having the conversations that we should have been having 40 years ago. I mean, it's late, but at least it's happening, you know? And I'm glad you mentioned that because it reminded me of a couple of things I want to bring up. Okay, you probably heard the president and Kennedy talking about how come September we were going to start talking about the causes of autism. And they said the causes, there's multiple causes, right? And one of them that there's been research out there for a while, but I think they really gave it a lot of attention, was that apparently that if you take Tylenol, women who are pregnant who take Tylenol and they have a folate deficiency have a much higher rate of autism amongst their children, right? That's not a vaccine, that's not genetics. Oh, by the way, I didn't talk about genetics. For the last 20 years, the only thing that's been acceptable to research as a cause of autism is genetics. We've spent $3 or $4 billion on it. And in 20 years, they have not come up with a single gene or combination of genes that has a statistically significant correlation with autism. Not one in 20 years. Yep.
Wouldn't the Y chromosome be some sort of statistical significance? Because you said before, it's 4 boys to 1 girl.
Right.
So
boys are more vulnerable to something, but they have not been, well, let's put it this way, there's not ways to think about what, from the genetic standpoint, they have not been able to locate what the gene is that's responsible for that.
okay.
It's one of the many unknown questions. Why are boys more vulnerable? We don't know. Another thing that has come, Kennedy has brought up, which I think is really important to talk about, is about 20 years ago, the CDC decided to do an analysis of the MMR vaccine and its relationship to autism. And so they did this study down in Atlanta. They looked at all the school records of all the kids in Atlanta. They had like 250,000 or 500,000 or something like that records. And what they were testing to see is if the age at which the MMR vaccine was given had any relationship to autism later in life. And what they found is that with black boys, that kids who got the who got the MMR vaccine at 1 year old, as opposed to 3 years old, had 4 times as much autism. Right? And they tried to figure it out, they tried to massage the numbers, they couldn't make it go away, and they basically the conclusion was real. And you would know what they did, and we know they did this because one of the people who was there came out as a whistleblower and said they did it. They got together in their boss's office and they destroyed all their data. And they redesigned the study several times to make sure they came up with a study that showed no correlation. The guy's name is William Thompson. I'm sure you're going to be hearing more about him. Yeah.
Well, what about the religious groups in America, like the Amish and the Mennonites, and the religious Mormons in Utah? and Hasidic Jews, where they shunned from getting shots and listen to the government.
Right.
And they ever did a study on these people to see if they get all these diseases, autism?
Not that's been released. There was a journalist about 20 years ago by the name of Dan Olmsted who did basically went from one end of the Amish community to the other looking for an autistic kid, and he couldn't find him. Right. And it's kind of interesting. All right, they did away with the religious exemption, right, in New York.
Isn't that a small segment, though?
Yeah, but it's not. There should be some. There should be proportional to.
Yeah, but if it's 1 in 10 million or something
Yeah.
like that, then there should be the same ratio.
Right, but it wasn't. There was essentially no autistic kids. So I should tell you'd think they'd want to research that, right? But they don't. They cover these things up. And interestingly enough, they did away. I was talking about earlier. They did away with the religious exemption, right? There's a Supreme Court case going on because the vast majority of Amish people do not vaccinate their kids, and they did not shut their schools down either. So they're still sending their kids to school, and the schools are still teaching them, right? And Hochul basically has been giving them all these huge fines for it. But they can charge them $2,000 per kid per day, right? And then the Amish are just saying, do what you're going to do, because we're not cooperating. And it's probably on its way to the Supreme Court. Did anybody watch the hearing today? I know you did. All right. But if you did, one of the first speaker at the hearing was Aaron Siri. And Aaron Siri is the lawyer in that case. And I know Aaron. He used to live in Jamaica, Queens, with his 4 kids who went to yeshiva. And when they pulled the religious exemption, he had to pack up his kids and move to Arizona. Yeah. So, yes, sir.
John, recently you had a case in Suffolk Supreme.
Right.
You had about 300 people there. Was that your case with your child?
No, but we were working with a family. What you're referring to, as I mentioned earlier, that Hochul is trying to do away with the medical exemptions, right? Like kids who have had medical exemptions for 10 years. Kids who have had, there's one family that got denied. They had a older sibling who died from the flu shot, went to vaccine court, and they said, yes, this kid died from the flu shot, and the younger siblings can't get medical exemptions. Okay. But anyway, there was a family in Oceanside. Kids had religious exemptions. They did away with the religious exemptions. The parents decided to get the kids the shots so they could stay in school. The girl had a horrible reaction to the shots. She developed like 3 or 4 different autoimmune issues, like rheumatoid arthritis, like horrible skin things going on. She was in a wheelchair for a long period of time because of it, right? So they applied for a medical exemption, right? They had 6 doctors sign letters saying this kid should not get an exemption, right? And the school turned them down.
Should not get the exemption?
I mean, should not get the shot.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. They had 6 doctors say this kid should not get a shot, that it could do her a great deal of harm. And we're talking about one hepatitis, she's missing one hepatitis B shot. Okay? She's got everything else. Okay? And like I said this earlier, hepatitis B is spread by this through exchanging bodily fluids. Right? And if she had an active case of hepatitis B, she could go to school. But because she hasn't had the hepatitis B shot, they're saying she can't go to school, even though her doctors are saying that it could harm her. It's pretty amazing. And one of the things that's gone on in New York, we've actually got a pretty good law in New York when it comes to medical exemption. This is another legal reform issue here. The law says that if a New York licensed physician thinks that a vaccine could harm a child, could, that the kid doesn't need to get shot. And the courts have said since then that, that is strictly up to the doctor. Now, what the Department of Health has done is over the years is they've completely perverted that and turned it around. And their regulations say, no, the decision is up to the person running the school, right? And what they do is they go around to the schools and say to the principals and the superintendents, you can make your own decision, but if you make the wrong decision, we're going to give you a $2,000 a day fine for any kid in the school for whom you made the wrong decision. And of course, what's the wrong decision? To give them the exemption. Right? So the exemption rate is absolutely plummeted. You're talking about medically fragile kids who can get harmed by this, and they're doing everything they can to make them get it. Now, this family went to court. Fortunately, the judge just threw the case out. But he didn't throw it out, but he said, the girl, you can go back to school. We'll hear this. They probably won't hear it till next summer when she's going to graduate by then anyway. But what it did, though, is it sort of really laid it out that the law says what the law says. And what the law says is the decision is up to the doctor. Not the school principal, not the superintendent, not the school's consulting physician. It says what the letter of the law says, that if the doctor signs it, that's it. And we're really hopeful that this is going to be the end to people having their medical exemptions denied. And what he was referring to is that she had a court date out in Islip at the federal court out there in the 2nd District, or Eastern District, and we had about 300 or 400 people show up. So, people are watching this, yeah.
I'm sorry, what school district was this?
Oceanside.
And do you know what law firm this is speaking of?
Stern Sokolov. Do you know that? They did not distinguish themselves in court. I was sort of shocked.
But then the problem is the school districts are using our own money to fuel their kids' taxpayer money.
Exactly.
So they'll go on forever and ever, endless process of money.
Very good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm hearing that the insurance companies, you said the doctors can write an exemption, but the insurance companies are pressuring the doctors' practices that if a certain percentage of their patients are not vaccinated, then they would not cover. They would kick them out of the insurance. So there's pressure on pediatricians now that from the insurance companies that they have to do this. What do you know about that? I've heard it has to be like 99% of their patients need to be vaccinated in order for them to accept that insurance.
And they also offer bonuses.
Yeah, also the bonuses which are given by the drug companies? Or is that by...
I would assume.
Why would the insurance companies have such a vested interest? I can understand the drug companies, but it doesn't really make sense to me why the insurance companies would want to put this pressure on.
Maybe they think it's going to save them some money. I don't really know. But they do it, you know. And a lot of the big practices just simply won't, you know, if you don't follow exactly the schedule,
They'll kick them out.
they'll kick you out. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It must be divine providence why I came down from the casket today. Because,
Hold on a second. I know you have something very profound to say, and I don't want anyone to miss it.
Okay, my name is, my family here knows me as Jawan Bey, but I had to reclaim my birth name for another reason, which is what I came here to speak on. But it's, again, divine providence that I'm here because I work with a indigenous ecclesiastic trust consortium that deals with spiritual healing. We have defeated 5 state agencies of Department of Health or whatever that have tried to suspend doctors' licenses.
Is that UHSS?
That's UHSS.
I just met with you guys like 2 weeks ago.
And Mary Holland.
Yeah.
With Bobby Kennedy's group.
Right.
They're very seriously thinking about including us into their platform because we have stopped the state agencies from suspending doctors' licenses for doing the very things you're talking about here. And Dr. Reverend Bill
Yeah.
Oxenall, would you pass this around so people can get copies of it? He's in Japan right now working with some doctors. He was on the phone with Mary Holland and some of the people from Bobby Kennedy's group.
Right.
And they're seriously thinking about integrating Dr. Bill's spiritual, medicinal, ecclesiastic, indigenous methodologies dealing with autism. He's had some serious success
Right.
using, I'm not at liberty to explain the methodologies because it's private intellectual property. And the way we defeated the state agencies from suspending the doctor's licenses is we've asked them to provide us with whatever statutory law or even case law that says that they can interfere with private intellectual medicinal practices that the people who have come to us sign contracts. That's the key. They sign a contract, non-disclosure, and then the other thing is that they're part of a research protocol. So where the religious exemption fails, where the doctor's exemption fails, they cannot interfere with intellectual property research. That's contracted. So that comes into Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1.6 of the Constitution, which says you cannot, interfere with a contract relationship.
Right.
You see? So when we asked the state agencies, and we defeated 5 states,
Right.
protecting 5 doctors from having their licenses suspended,
Well, we need a whole lot of that.
using our legal strategies, basically telling them, listen, we will comply with whatever you want doctors to do. If you can prove to us you have a right to interrupt or interfere with private intellectual property research, which they've never answered. And
Right.
as a result of that, they had to dismiss or withdraw whatever actions they were taking against doctors to suspend their license. We won 5 cases with that. We're still dealing here in New York with there's 2 that now have taken it to the state court,
Right.
which we're going to deal with in state court. But again, I don't want to take too much of your time.
Well, you just gave me a really good idea. All right. That when you cited the article in the Constitution that relates to contracts, because one of the big problems that we have with the medical exemptions is that the schools here on Long Island particularly, they all have consulting physicians, right? And the way it's been working is that you get some school administrator who has to make this decision about the medical exemption. They give it to the school physician. The school physician almost always says deny it, and then they deny it. But what's always troubled me about this is that the child's physician is the child's physician, right? That doctor has a legal and moral obligation to do what is best for that kid. That's why you go to a doctor, right? The school's physician has no such contractual relationship with a kid. But they're interfering with the contractual obligation of the child and their own doctor. I'm just wondering if what you just said might be another avenue that we can start going
Well,
after
it's
these
been
school
successful
districts.
so far.
Yeah, no,
We've
that's
been
great.
able to hold them at bay from attacking these doctors. Now, the overarching problem is most of the doctors don't come underneath our umbrella
Right.
of being an ecclesiastic indigenous entity. Whereas, let's say, for example, anybody in here who has issues with a child that has autism, and they want to have access to our methodologies and protections, their doctors would have to become members of our institutions,
Right.
the UHSS. They would have to become party to that. They would have to sign non-disclosure contract agreements, which they themselves would come under the protections, and we would
Right.
greatly appreciate Bobby giving us, his appreciation and support, because then we'll have the political clout to tell
Right.
these agencies back the hell up. We have the administrator of the health
The secretary.
secretary.
Health
Yeah,
and
we
Human
have the appreciation and support of the Secretary of Health and anybody that's a member of our constituency is not only covered under the ecclesiastic indigenous umbrella, but we have political support from Bobby.
Well, I think you're really onto something there, and I really like the fact that you're actually organizing doctors. No, that's fine. I'll go as long or short or wrap it up. Okay. This,
At least give your email address.
yeah.
So
If-
that people can contact you.
And I would appreciate it if you would talk to Bobby's people and let them know we're open arms. We're waiting for the embrace.
I have.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. So, folks, if you want to reach me, I'm at J Gilmore. That's JGILMORE. I have cards up here if you want one. At Autism Action Network, all one word, autismactionnetwork.org. And if you have any situations that you think I could help with, medical exemption, a school exemption, college religious exemptions, work, stuff like that, we deal with this all the time. And don't hesitate to contact me. And so I really thank you for inviting me. I really thank you for your time. And if you want to ask me questions, I'll be here. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, John. And our next speaker is going to be Jim Fiegel from the ALR board.
Thank you, James.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out and caring about your community and what's going on. I stand before you as a Marine Corps veteran, a member of this community, and also as a plaintiff in a civil rights lawsuit against the supervising judge, Judge Karen Lagercio. I have to resort and look at this for information. I just want to mention, because of accountability, and I want to be precise. This case, the presiding U.S. District Judge is Judge Brown, the assigned magistrate is Judge Lindsay, and the defendant is Karen Lagercio, supervising judge. The case number for those at home, because I want everybody to follow this, because we're going to show some video here that's going to clear the air on some things, being that I was charged with harassment and given an order of protection against the judge. Given an order of protection. How many of you would think that order of protection would be dismissed? For that to be dismissed, something was wrong. So we're gonna talk about that. But I just want to give the case number is CR-035657-24SU. Okay, this case is public. Anybody could look it up and read every filing. I do court watching. I was an iron worker for 34 years in the city, a union iron worker. I don't have kids, but due to the untimely death of my brother, who had a 5-year-old, I found myself in family court. And I can't express to you the atrocities that happened there. My case is over. I see my nephew all the time. He's at my house this summer, weeks at a time. I watch him with the football and lacrosse, everything like that. But what I witnessed going there, I'm retired now, so I have the time to court watch. Because I can't go on with life knowing what I know. There's some atrocities, and maybe you experienced them in your life, where you just couldn't let go. We're talking about innocent, loving children. We're talking about grandparents. My God, how could this happen? I couldn't believe that this was happening in the family courts. So I started court watching, sometimes 4 times a week, for years. And I met good people and parents. And listen, I'm not talking about if there's any abuse or neglect. Certainly not. We all agree upon that. But maybe somebody here has a relative that was in family court that would know what transpires and the silver bullet thing that they use. And parents, 50% of the marriages end up in divorce, so you're going to find yourself a family court. And then what happens is innocent, loving children and their families and lives are ripped apart because of the hate and anger
and that gets passed on to the children. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but anyway, I filed numerous complaints about the judges. I want to talk about one judge in particular. And listen, again, I'm very transparent. I encourage anybody to go to 400 Carlton Avenue, Central Islip, and go look and see what happens in family court. We have a judge, Judge Matthew G. Hughes, who has closed the family courtroom over 500 times and is still doing it. Again, let me repeat that. Judge Matthew G. Hughes, Part 10, second floor. Please go check it out. You'll know you're in the right courtroom when you see that the word, where it has the phrase, "In God we trust," the word God is covered up. And I asked him why he put the flag there. Could you just move it over? And they haven't. It's been like that. Like I said, you can go check it out yourself. So over 500 times. To my knowledge and research, that's more than any other judge in the entire country. And what's even more disturbing is that this judge is going to waltz in this November for a 10-year term. A 10-year term at $230,000 a year. $230,000, good folks, and he's closing the courtroom to the public. One has to ask, how could that, is that not a red flag? There's been multiple litigants that reached out to Facebook begging for court watchers. There's been numerous complaints. Anyway, please check out Judge Hughes, Part 10, second floor. You'll see what happens. He's going to waltz into a $230,000 job for 10 years. And he's going to waltz in. How is he going to waltz in? Because when they have the election, there's 3 seats. And there's only 3 people running. So are we deciding to put him in? But I got to call him out. I can't just let that go like that. And the people that I'm dealing with are very powerful, powerful people. But when it comes to what I experienced, what I had to see a 5-year-old child go through, I can't. And I hope it never happens to you. But there's people that are coming out of there, they got the dazed and confused, and they don't even know. It's incredible. It will change you forever. So anyway, getting back to what happened was, I made complaints about Judge Hughes, and they fell on deaf ears. Probably 20, 30 complaints, because one of the things that Judge Hughes was doing in Part 10 on the second floor was he was closing the courtroom to the public. And at that time, about 40, 50 times, I got it recorded, and I'm so glad that I took such detailed notes, and not just in Judge Hughes' room, other judges' rooms. But I'm so glad that I took such detailed notes of the times and the dates that this happened. So what would happen was, Judge Hughes would close the courtroom to the public, citing sensitive information, citing Catherine B., 189, Second Department, which is Katie Beers, if a child could be embarrassed. And I agree. In certain situations and in certain cases, yes, the courtroom should be closed. In rare occasions. But not when the judge cites sensitive information only. Because I need to know the nature of that sensitive information, because anything could be sensitive. So I would stand up and say, "Hi, my name is James Spiegel, I'm a member of the public. I request to be heard on the closing of the court." Because according to Wilder v. Georgia, 1984, there's certain criteria. It's called the 4-part rule. A judge just can't close the courtroom. He has to have a reason to close the courtroom. And when I would stand up, he would tell me, "Sit down." Or he would say, in the beginning, he would let me speak on it, and I would explain to him that just citing sensitive information isn't enough. With that, he would close the courtroom, and I would leave, and anybody that's not directly involved with the case would have to leave also, including attorneys, because they're not part of the case. It makes sense. After about 6 months of that, because the attorneys who are part of the Bar Association and everything like that, One day I went in there and they closed the courtroom to the public, and the court officers told them, you don't have to leave. And I was leaving by myself. See, what happened was the lawyers, who all know each other, they all have meetings and they deal with different aspects, they all deal with each other like that. They were able to stay in the courtroom. And I complained about that. And this is still going on. And it's a violation. They shouldn't make a two-tier system. If I have to leave as a member of the public because I'm not directly involved with the case, well, shouldn't they? What happened was the lawyers, I heard, ended up complaining because when the lawyers came out of the courtroom, who would they run into?
Their clients.
Their clients. And they would have to stay out there like myself for 15, 20, 30 minutes for the hearing. So now you would have 7 or 8 different attorneys out there waiting, which I guess they got tired of doing that. But the clients were happy at the time. They were like, hey, I get to speak to my attorney. You know, especially the 18B attorney, you know, the one that you meet 5 minutes, you got a child's life on the line, and you're meeting that attorney for 5 minutes before the court begins to open. What a disgrace. Anyway, so I filled out a lot of reports and everything like that, and it was getting nowhere. And I got to tell you something. 400 Carlton Avenue, I have sat in courtrooms. On the criminal side, I have never had a problem on the criminal side with their judges. And one of the reasons is because they have juries, right? So the ultimate decision. Over in family court, with hundreds of cases, it's impossible for them to maintain the knowledge of what's going on with these cases, because some of these cases go on for 3, 4, 5 years. And they stop sporadically in between that. So I made these complaints and everything like that. And I had no recourse. I wasn't getting anywhere. I'm sorry, I'm a little all over the place because it's my first time actually doing this. So just bear with me there. With Judge Hughes and what was happening in the family court, as far as the judges on the criminal side, I'm welcomed over there. And there are family court judges that I'm welcomed in that courtroom, and the great family court judges. They allow me to be in the courtroom, and they allow me to speak. And I'm really thinking about putting up a hall of fame and a hall of shame and publicize that. I can't mention the good judges because I fear that maybe people will get to them and speak to them, and they may have more animosity. So until I do that wall of shame and wall of fame. So anyway, I just want to set this up here because I figured, as I mentioned earlier, the charges against me from a sitting judge, the supervising judge, was dismissed, an order of protection. And that was by who I consider the great Ray Tierney. He dismissed those charges, and that took balls. That took a lot of courage. Imagine dismissing it. But I'm telling you, there was a reason that he dismissed it also. Because the judge lied. For 6 months, my constitutional rights to go over to that courthouse and sit in there was violated. I had people waiting for me to court watch, and children's lives and their lives of their own families was on the line. And people today are afraid to go over there because of what happened to me. Thousands of dollars in an attorney fees. I don't know if anybody knows about Sean Paul Reyes in Long Island Audit. He has over 1 million views. 5 months into it, he played a video that showed the judge lied. And that's why it put a lot of pressure. Over 450,000 views, good folks. 450,000 views. And the next day, it was dismissed. So I want to clear the air because when they were speaking in there, they mentioned about September 12th, happens to be my birthday, September 12th and August 27th. How I harassed her, and they use this as Mr. Fiegel has done this in the past. So I think it's only proper for the good folks to see that video. And let's see how I harassed Judge Legurcio on September 12th. Thank you, James.
I'm not getting the audio on this. I think it's probably on the computer.
Oh, boy.
Bring the microphone over to the computer.
Okay.
And is the computer playing it, or is it muted? Let's try it.
Very important for the good folks to see.
Okay. Let's try it again. Unfortunately, I am not getting. All right, that might be another way to do it. Pardon?
Little technical errors.
You will pay back later.
Don't know how to get back to where I was.
Well,
All right. Yeah.
We need a 3-year-old kid.
yes.
I was on Facebook. Getting back there. Oops.
Can you go to your YouTube page where you have it and play it from there
I'm just not getting sound.
on the YouTube?
Yeah, I'm blocked on YouTube. Americans for Legal Reform.
Sorry about that, folks. A little technical.
Technical difficulties. Alright. I can tell you that it's all in this video if you want to click on this video. However, I'm not sure why the sound is not coming up on that one.
What about the USB drive? Will that work?
We can do that
Okay, here it is.
if you've got it on there. All right. This mouse, come on.
Right up on the case.
All right, now I've got to go through that to find it, but I will.
Thank you for being patient, everybody.
Oh, actually, yeah, that should be okay.
While you're doing all this, can you recite that case again?
What case was that?
Wallaby, Georgia.
I would love to sue a judge.
It's
I'm not
CR
getting anything.
0-35657-24
That could be.
Because you're not getting any sound.
If you can help out with that, that would be great.
That's the judge right there.
Yeah,
Supervisor
but
Judge Gershman.
unfortunately, we're still not getting sound.
I think the sound has to come out of the system.
False written statement and removing Judge Lugercio from
Can
the
we go
bench
skip
and the
this,
practice.
Jim? Yep, there we go.
Let's see if
Good
I
folks are
can.
looking for, have them on the edge of their seat.
I'm an IT genius.
Yes, you are.
Thank God for that.
All right. So
Look like a nice sneak.
all right. Would you type Americans for Legal Reform again? Oh, there it is. Never mind.
Seemed like we just had it. What happened?
Yeah, it bounced back to restart. There we go.
Jim was nice enough to go out and make this 3D model. A lot of days, weeks, and months working on his case. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, that's the courthouse, and unfortunately, this mouse is not behaving quite like I had hoped. Sorry, folks, this, there we go. That should do it.
That's May
That's May
14th.
14th.
We got it, yep.
That's September 12th.
September 12th. Let's see how Mr. Fiegel acted with the judge. Hopefully we get some sound.
Now, CPS failed them miserably. Shame on them.
Jim, can you rewind it from the beginning?
Sure.
Good morning, Judge. Would you like to comment on the death of Tommy Valvernell? CPS failed them miserably. Shame on them.
Just looking for a comment. We all know about Thomas Valvernell and how he died. And how CPS failed him. Can we go to August 27th, please?
That's what you got arrested for?
We can, well, no.
You go-
I think he's trying
One
to-
more, you'll see. Yep, that's why it's very important that the public.
repeat.
Exactly.
The first time.
August 27th.
August 27th.
That's why the
I
great
believe.
district
No,
attorney
that's
right
May
here, and
14th.
he dismissed the charges. But I had to go 5 months,
Yeah, they put you through hell.
thousands of dollars.
This is not behaving as it used to.
Did it work better with the other one up over there that you got it working with before?
Hang on, let me get out of here. The mouse is different on this computer. Okay. It's clicking on areas that I'm just trying to maneuver, and it's clicking.
Looking for the guy to shoot.
Looks like you're moving better that way, James. There you go.
Okay. No, that's November 6th. That's August 27th.
August 27th. Let's see how my interaction was. Got sound?
Let's see if the supervising judge is in agreement with Judge Hughes closing the courtroom to
On
the
the
public while
sidewalk.
simultaneously allowing his lawyer colleagues and friends
Mentioning Judge
to
Hughes.
stay in the courtroom. Judge Legurcio, do you agree with Judge Hughes' practice of closing the courtroom to the public and allowing his lawyer friends and colleagues to stay in the courtroom? Good folks, this isn't her practice. She does the right thing. And when there's sensitive information, all attorneys, it makes sense. Through Waller, through Hinton.
At this time,
When is enough enough, good people? Surely we could do better than this.
At this time, I'm saying that she doesn't do the practices that Judge Hughes does. But then she did do the practices and followed up, such as getting off the bench. What they do now, good folks, when they close the courtroom to the public, and as soon as I get up to speak, they immediately get up, go out the back door. Now, the last order was to close the courtroom. So I have to leave, leaving that in secrecy. There's no record of anybody even challenging the closing of the court. Could you imagine it? They literally get up, and there's people inside this room that have been in the courtroom, and I told them about this, and they've seen it for themselves. So the public and people and litigants and families, lives are being dictated while working in secrecy. What is it to hide? If you have to close the courtroom, justify it. Jim, can we go to November 6th? The date that I got charged. And they referenced those two other dates. I didn't do anything.
First video.
First video.
It's despicable, good folks. A shame. A shame. Why is that? Following Judge Hughes? To me, it's a disgrace, good people.
On the
Shame.
sidewalk. Look how far away I am.
May I ask, was the charges dropped for this?
Yes, the charges were ultimately dropped after, 6 months.
Of those charges from the court?
I'm sorry?
Did you get a disposition
Yes.
certified?
Yes.
Okay, then you have an actionable claim.
Yes, that's why I'm suing in federal court.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. Okay, I'm far away, enough distance. And you gotta remember, they see me over 200-300 times out there. And the reason I do is because every time I go there, I run into somebody that says, hey, excuse me, can you help me? Can you help me? There's too many tears that have been...
Was you detained at any time?
Excuse me?
Was you detained at any time?
Yes, I was detained. I just can't talk about that because I have a pending case, but thank you. I was, yes. And ultimately, I was let go and no charges were filed.
The case in the federal court is still pending?
Yes. That's right, and I have that case number if anybody...
Excellent.
How did they react when you,
Yes, sir.
how did they react when you were exonerated and went back to court one?
Well, so now that was interesting, folks. You got to remember, I was banned for, I believe it was 6 months. And then the same judge who did that, because, a lot of people got mud on their face around there, because what happened was, you did this to somebody, and then not only were the charges dismissed, the order of protection was dismissed. Could you imagine being a judge and you did this to somebody? I was facing jail time, good folks. And off of the two videos that you've seen there were mentioned that I did it in the past, and that's what I did in the past. So now you've just seen this one. Jim, can we roll the final one? Now what happened was, they see the court officer, they escort the people into the building. And what happened here was, the court officer and the judge walked to the back. So now, there's a time gap of... I thought the judge was already in the building. I'm walking back there because the court officer never came back. There's other judges that are coming up. So now I want to see why he isn't coming back there, because I don't want to be alone with
Good
other
morning.
judges.
How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Never told to leave.
Have
or
a good
anything.
day.
Guess what I see when I turn around? They got locked out, good folks. Good morning, Judge Legurcio. Can I ask a question on why you leave the courtroom and close the courtroom to the public without giving them an opportunity to speak? No response? Good folks, is this what we get from our judiciary? Is this fair? I got detained coming out of a courtroom, good folks. In a previous
As
incident.
a man, a veteran, a member of this community, certainly we can do better than this, good people.
Now I'm slowing up, I'm letting them walk.
We have to hold judges accountable. They are not above the law.
I'm taking my time, letting them walk ahead. At no time did anybody tell me to leave, right? For this.
Good folks, they use sneaky practices of running off the bench.
Remember what I was telling you
running
about?
off the bench. How could that? And we have to hold them accountable. Absolutely.
There goes the court officer to the front because
When is
he's
enough
waiting.
enough, good folks?
He's waiting for the other judges to come in. So those are the 3 videos, and for that I was facing 15 days in jail. Yes, oh.
No, I'm only pushing you because you're standing by the door. We only got 5 minutes that we got to get out. So just in the last couple minutes, first of all, if anybody, you can just look at this as the whole thing. There's nothing that wasn't recorded. Is this something that deserves an order of protection? And we want to spend our taxpayer money? I mean, we know what needs an order of protection. This.
Was that included as exhibits in your?
Yes, they are. I'm doing it now. But good folks, could you imagine that I would face the retaliation because I'm going to court? If it was your son or grandson or your grandmother and you had somebody that was court watching, I do this. I don't get paid for this. I do this on my own time. I do it because I seen what I seen in family court.
And our previous guest, what he was talking about was, whistleblowers. And as far as I'm concerned, Jim falls under the whistleblower law because he's blowing the whistle about what's going on in family court, what's going on with the judges, and he should get additional protection as a whistleblower. This is exactly what these laws are designed to protect. And, and he was maliciously prosecuted. He had a judge that was sent in from out of the county, which was supposed to be so that you have an unbiased, fair judge. And many of us were there to support him. And if you heard what this judge said when he was told that the case was being dismissed, instead of saying, we've looked at the case and the district attorney has decided not to prosecute, he went on his own tirade basically about how bad Jim was for what he did and how he should have done all these things, which, by the way, Jim tried to do beforehand. This was his last resort, what he did, by questioning the judge in public. He tried to do it in the court. He was kicked out of the court. So he tried to do it legally. All these things address your government. He tried to do it, and he couldn't do it. So, Jerome, we got to cut it short because I don't want to have us not be allowed to be in the driveway.
You might recall the judge that had the hot dog guy arrested and put in jail because the hot dog was no good at
All right. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. If you want, Jim will be out front signing autographs, but if you want to ask Jim any questions, he'll be out front. We just have to be out of the library at 7 o'clock.
Yes, thank you,
He's standing by the door.